Good afternoon. One of the first things I want to say is that our program for the luncheon talks is actually about watershed protection. And this came about some time ago when I was talking to our speakers here, that it's very important to have watershed protection as part of the state implementation plan and as part of the federal plan. I wear two hats. I'm on the Arkansas Basin Roundtable, and I also am a member of the Pike-San Isabel Rural Advisory Committee, which is part of the USDA, which funds watershed protection and fire mitigation. So anyway, a lot of the watershed is in or on federal property, federal land, and this is something the U.S. Forest Service has been working for a long time to help keep the watersheds in good shape. And also, when I introduce the speakers here, is that this is something that our federal representatives take to heart. Without the people we send back to Washington and help secure water protection for Colorado, we would not have any water protection. So it's a joint effort. It's part of the state plan and it's part of the federal plan. So what I want to do is introduce the speakers here. Erin Minks, she currently serves Senator Mark Udall's as a regional director out of Alamosa. She's also serves on the Senator's Senior Water Advisory Policy. And then Brian McCain is a former Congressman Allred staffer and is currently Congressman Tipton's regional director. And then Jane Darnell, she is now the acting forest and grassland supervisor for the Pike-San Isabel National Forest and the Cimarron and Comanche National Grasslands in Pueblo. And on the Rural Advisory Committee that I sit on, I work with Jane's folks up there, and we've been working very hard at it. I just met Jane this morning. She's new there. But the people up there at the Pueblo office and the National Forest Service are tremendous, and we have been doing a lot of work in the past to keep our watersheds in good shape. So I'm going to introduce now Jane, who's going to talk about the Forest Service's part in watershed protection.
First and foremost, I really want to thank you for including the Forest Service in this very important discussion. This is a critical discussion for Colorado. It remains a critical discussion across the West, water quality and water quantity. It's a real honor for me to represent the Pike and San Isabel National Forests and Cimarron and Comanche National Grasslands. Though I am only here in an interim role, we've got some fine folks at this table. We've got a district ranger and staff from our supervisor's office and a water rights paralegal that works for us out of Canyon City. And let me put that differently, works for you. We are proud to be your public servants. And I think that, and I hope that most of you find the Forest Service folks that you work with to be very dedicated in their service to the public lands. And if you don't mind, I'd really kind of like to indulge. Can we give the folks at that table a round of applause? And I've had the pleasure of talking with a few of you, and I know that you work with our district rangers in Salida and Leadville and Fairplay and the South Platte Ranger District outside of Denver and Colorado Springs, Elkhart, Kansas, Springfield office here in Atlanta. And I encourage you to keep working with us. We want to be part of this discussion. And as it builds to presenting the plan to the governor and the last rounds of public involvement and most especially the implementation, we want to be full partners with you. And I have to tell you a little bit about my background, a little bit more. I actually grew up in Colorado. I grew up in Loveland. And I went to Colorado State University. And I was lucky enough to get into the back door of the Forest Service. I don't know how. I have an ag business degree, farm and ranch management. But it's been a wonderful career. One of the things I did through college is I was a ditch rider on a rural irrigation district in southern Wyoming. So when I hear you folks talk about what you're doing every day, and my uncle was a veterinarian, sir, so I read your bio with interest, it really strikes home for me. And a lot of these discussions and the collaboration is long overdue, but there are a lot of forces that are driving us together. So with water as the lifeblood in the West and Colorado in particular, and how it crosses all these boundaries, we all have a stake in being successful in the work that we're undertaking right now. No one entity has all the answers. Water management is truly a collaborative business. I'm really happy to share with you what's happening in the Arkansas Basin and National Forest System lands with our partners. And I emphasize with our partners. I don't think it's any secret our forest health conditions aren't what we would want them to be. And I'm not going to throw the folks that came before us under the bus. I believe that they had the best intentions with the management conditions of the past. Nobody intentionally got us to the place we are now, where conditions may be poor to fail. But we're not going to get out of it overnight either. So we're united in our goal for a healthier, more resilient forest landscape and the watersheds associated with it. So in 2010, we completed a forest-wide watershed condition assessment. And that was really a nationwide effort. But with particular attention here in Colorado, it dovetails with the start of a lot of this work that you're doing. So we wanted to be able to identify the most at-risk watersheds so we could be more strategic with the investment of scarce resources that we have. We want to reduce the risk to soil and water resources. So part of that is reducing the threat and the effect of catastrophic natural events, whether they're wildfires. Wildflowers are not necessarily catastrophic unless they're wet. Flood events, and you folks have been getting more than your fair share of those. Currently, we're reducing fire risk by thinning much more aggressively than what we've been able to do in the past. Right now, we're thinning about 2,000 acres a year across the Pike and San Isabel in particular, and we're aiming to increase that to 3,000 to 4,000 acres a year in the next just 2 to 3 years. We're also addressing impacts to soil and water resources from roads through better management, such as improvements in culverts and crossings, and trying to think ahead in the science on can we be proactive, anticipating events, and working on some sediment management before those events might happen. We're not implementing a lot of that on the ground right now, but we're heavily involved with NRCS and our other partners in trying to identify and implement that kind of activity as well. Over the next 10 years, our goal is to work with our partners, and I'm going to list some of these and specific acreage, but 60,000 acres plus of treatment in these critical at-risk watersheds. We've got 17,000 acres queued up under the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Partnership. We've got 10,000 acres in a partnership with Colorado Springs Utilities, 1,000 acres with Pueblo, 15,000 acres in a project you'll be seeing more about and hopefully already are aware of, the Tennessee Creek Project. It's currently out or shortly out for review. I'm seeing a nod in the audience out of our Leadville office. 20 to 25,000 acres in existing Forest Service projects. Kind of what we've been able to do under our own capacity that's queued up. That's part of this mix. And 1,000 to 1,500 acres of prescribed fire each year. Wildfires, just like all the water issues, cross the boundaries. I would be remiss in not mentioning the Denver Water Partnership and the 10,000 acres that we've got going on in the South Platte River Basin. Waldo Canyon fire effects. I visited with someone talking about that fire coming right to your back doors. And unfortunately, that's an experience many folks in the West share. Addressing the effects of that. We started with $7 million in Forest Service burn area emergency restoration projects. That's been leveraged to $31 million through partnerships with your communities and other agencies. Much work has been accomplished, but that Waldo recovery, like most fire recovery, will go on for many more years. We're gaining leverage in the Arkansas watershed. Again, none of us can do it alone. NRCS, I've mentioned, effectively using the EQIP program and other programs within the Farm Bill, which we're very grateful to have a Farm Bill. So I'm nodding to my colleagues. Southeastern Water Conservancy, Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District, we're actively involved with developing a memorandum of understanding along with the Bureau of Reclamation. And of course, the Arkansas Roundtable, which we've heard a lot about, and the Basin Implementation Planning. Our folks are trying to get to those meetings as you hold them. Please keep us in mind as you get schedules and so forth so that we can provide what you need. And please let us know, how can we most effectively participate in these? We've got a lot of information, and sometimes we show up with the best intentions and not the stuff you need. So stop by those district offices, talk to the likes of Paul speaking right there, and let us know what you need. And we want to be there. We want to continue to be a part of this discussion. So thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Jane. Next person I'll call on is Erin Meeks. She is with Senator Mark Udall's office.
Thank you, Al. I also wanted to take a chance to introduce Gloria Gutierrez. Gloria is the Regional Director for Senator Udall for Southeast Colorado out of Pueblo. So we are part of the team here. Jane really kind of already talked quite a bit about, kind of hit the main points really. I think as the water community, when you think about watershed health and you think about the various tools in your toolbox as a ditch company, as a municipality, there are a number of different forums which you logically want to be a part of. If you can be a part of making sure whatever annual or quarterly meeting that you hold, that you include resource managers in those conversations around any kind of, honestly, diversion structure issues, high country issues, this time of the year when you can finally get past melt to actually go in and do some maintenance. Maintaining those conversations with your federal and state partners is going to make you that much more prepared for when funding comes available to actually go in and do the mitigation work that you are going to need to do higher up in your watershed. Because as you all know, this side of the state is getting some beetle infestation. I don't believe it's the same scale as you might see with the mountain pine further north or the spruce beetle epidemic in the Rio Grande Basin that we know. But the bugs are coming your way. Bugs are coming to the Pike San Isabel. Our prevailing winds and our dust storms just send them just right over the Sangres into the Wets and into Custer County. And when that stage of infestation hits your forests and your agency partners are dealing with the scale of infestation that we see on the Rio Grande right now, it is a landscape scale conversation around treatment, prioritization, values at risk, all of these assessments that are underway, that are a really important, tough conversation to have, and the water community is directly involved with that. I don't have to tell all of you that. Senator Udall was very involved with the Farm Bill, trying to prioritize programs that would protect watershed health through forestry programs, to authorize the Forest Service to work through the Good Neighbor Authority, to work closer with the State Forest Service, and honestly, subdivisions, private partners, your soil conservation districts, to do cross-jurisdictional treatments, just like Jane listed. This is a kind of relationship that Congress has to reauthorize. Congress has to go back and revisit it and has to rubber stamp it, approve it, and fund it again. So that's the Good Neighbor Authority, and that was reauthorized in this Farm Bill. Another key piece that we were proud to see happen was further analysis of kind of large-scale infestation areas and giving the Forest Service the tools to prioritize those areas and move towards kind of, how do I say this without accelerated review of certain sensitive areas where we know there are values at risk, public kind of community safety and welfare issues that need to be prioritized. I think an example we can say right now of prioritizing an infestation area is something going on in the Rio Grande Basin with the Watershed Emergency Action Team, which Mike Gibson spoke about earlier today. And this is a model that I think is something for other basins to be prepared for. And all of you who are in your various basin meetings, I know a lot of you here today are part of different basins, you're here to learn about the Arkansas, but keep in mind what kind of conversation your basin has at a water level about fire preparedness. Does that happen on a regular basis? In the Rio Grande, I'm not sure if we could say it was happening, Mike, but the reality was, as we've already said before today, was that the biggest, most critical players when that fire broke out a year ago in June on the Rio Grande was anybody working on reservoir maintenance, delivery. Those are the first people to get impacted by that fire. And we developed a group at a basin level of private partners, agency partners, to support the Forest Service in their work. Because we know that the impacts on the public lands are at the top of the watershed. And the federal agencies have a lot of regs around how they can manage those public lands. But just below that is going to be all of your private land interests. And so that's actually a group that it's called the Rio Grande Watershed Emergency Action Team. They have a website, and the senator likes to use them as an example, honestly, of kind of how some of these communities have responded to wildfire and are continuing to work with state partners. I have to give kudos to the Colorado Water Conservation Board for coming forward and for helping fund a lot of really amazing work that that group is doing right now to get ahead of the next fire. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So when we go back to watershed health, I would just offer from Senator Udall's perspective that the water community always stay in an ongoing conversation, maintaining those relationships, staying in touch with your federal and your state and even your local partners. I can't speak enough about the soil conservation districts. Those are players that through the NRCS are able to be a lot more nimble when it comes to urgent issues. They are not federal agency employees, but they know the issues on the ground. So all of you who are part of a district or have worked for one, I really have to recognize that group. But as rural communities and watersheds, I think that's a big layer of that preparedness. And a lot of these tools are federal. We do have to fight to fund them. The Emergency Watershed Protection Program is another one, which Colorado Springs is, we're fighting to try and protect that. The whole delegation is working on that piece. So I will end there and hand it over to Brian.
Just want to say thanks again to Al for putting this together. This is great, so thank you. What Aaron said was right. It's this is a conversation and a dialogue that has to be ongoing. Everything on the federal side, we fight constantly to fund, and the entire delegation, Senate, Congress, we're looking out for Colorado. And in being that, like when you come to the fires or the infestation, a lot of it relies on federal tools, and there's a lot of red tape. And I think that all of us are working together to kind of cut through the red tape, because when a fire hits, you don't have 4 months to secure funding to come in and do this. We have to have redundancies set up to take care of it when it happens and plan for the next one, which is going to happen. We saw that last year and the year before. On a side topic, we just got out with a meeting with a student from Cambridge University, and he's getting his PhD and he studies mathematics. And what he's doing, he's going to come down here and he's doing his dissertation on fire and infestation. He's setting up, I think, in May, and he's going to be on the western slope for about 6 months, and then he's coming over to the Pueblo area. He's going to spend the next year studying this at a mathematical pattern-based system, which I thought was really interesting, because his idea is to go and work for the government with the CIA, NSA, and game theory. And the best way to watch massive migrations and changes, economic and physically, is the infestation of the beetles here, and also the fires and how the government reacted to it, and how funding worked, what didn't work, and he's using this to take back and hopefully make a better program, so we don't have to worry too much about this in the future. But just again, thanks for having this, and I want to reiterate, I'll drop my cards off. We need to be in this conversation. Everybody up on this table, I know Gloria, I see Dwight over there, Doris. This is something that we have to constantly be involved with and active with. It's about Colorado, it's about our watersheds and protecting this, and it's our future. So.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I want to give a big hand to our luncheon speakers today. They are really dedicated to this. I think we have a few minutes if there's any questions. Yes?
You all mostly talked about fire and needle infestation, and really I see almost a bigger issue in our area anyway, southeastern Colorado, is invasive species. What are you all doing? Is there anything, current legislation on addressing that? I'm talking plants.
Well, I think that there's a very basic level of what we're doing, which is honestly keeping federal agency staff available to work with local weed districts to do the work. I think the funding to do the work for weed districts is a constant challenge. To maintain those funding levels, to have adequate staffing, have adequate supplies, and to have that ongoing conversation with your weed districts is probably a priority that needs to be maintained.
Yeah, we don't have any weed districts in southeastern Colorado.
I would like to answer that. I'm on the Rural Advisory Committee, and one of the projects that actually I sponsored was the tamarask invasion along the Warpinol and Caceres and the Arkansas rivers to take those out because they're highly invasive. They crowd out the wildlife, they pollute the river, and so yes, with the federal programs, that's from the Title II Secure Rural Schools Act that comes in. There are special projects where the federal government puts money back into the communities that have had work done on federal and BLM land. So yes, these things are being addressed.
And there's, we're currently working on something, I don't know the details offhand, but I can get that to you. So after this, let me give you my card, because the tamarask issue is something that's coming up again. There's active discussion, at least on our side right now. So.
Well, and I think the State Department of Agriculture has a program focusing on weeds. I'm not going to speak for anyone else here who's with that agency, but your soil conservation districts, NRCS, FSA should have programs that if it's probably a local conversation to have. I know there was a window of time in certain regions where there was no active weed district, and everybody had to kind of get back together again and prioritize and get, as an overlayer of your soil conservation districts, your FSA county committees, however that happens. I think I've seen that conversation happen in other areas, but that's a local conversation also, which is important.
And if I might add, from a broader view in the National Forest System, I've been aware of this tamarask work going on in southeastern Colorado, and actually I had it in my notes and I didn't mention it, so I'm really glad you brought up this question. It's really been kind of a landmark effort with that species in particular, but it also brings home this weed business is not something we can turn our back on. You can't fight them for 20 years and then say you're done. And it too crosses boundaries, and the whole watershed health in the system contributes. So I guess it's just another opportunity to bring home that point that we're really in this all together, and whatever we can do on a local basis, we should pursue those things, and then reach out to those neighboring units as well across those boundaries. So.
Any more questions? Yes.
I'd like to make a suggestion. You know, when it comes to these quality assessments and risk assessments, I think that if the Forest Service were to look at what you would call your target market for those kind of assessments, it'd be nice if you all reached out and provided what the titles of these reports were, and provided those on a direct emailing basis, if you will, maybe to the people attending this meeting, the members of the Colorado Water Congress, because some of these studies are out there that would be helpful for water resource people, but we're just not connected to it. So if you reached out and made the connection more aggressively, that would be helpful, so we could discover these reports and embody them in our decision making.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I have 1 week left, and I'm going to change the world. Because I know our folks are going to try really hard to get to these meetings that you're having here in May coming up. We'll talk about what we can do to make those more readily accessible, and hopefully deliver some of that access to you, whether we post them on websites or through our partners or what have you, and try and make that more accessible. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think our time is out, but I would like to ask if there's any more comments from our group up here. Brian?
talk to us. Just keep us on the loop on everything.
Aaron?
So just thanks for letting me be here.
Jane?
Keep going. Get her done.
Thank you.